Before we get too far into this story, we need to talk about shoes. Basketball shoes.
When I was a kid, I didn't really care what I looked like from my ankles up, as long as I had some cool sneakers.
Dawn Staley grew up in the projects of North Philadelphia, a neighborhood described as tough but proud.
There is one pair of sneakers that I could not afford when I was growing up that I always wanted. It was an Adidas shoe, and it was called the Yvonne Lendls.
Yvonne Lendl was a champion tennis player in the 80s and early 90s. His shoe was one of the first to sell for $100. Now, you might wonder why Dawn wanted a pair of shoes named after a men's tennis player, but the fact is, signature women's basketball shoes simply did not exist. Years later, Dawn would be chosen to play on the 1996 women's Olympic basketball team. But not all her teammates shared her love of shoes.
I've never really been like a sneakerhead. I was never into sneakers like that.
Cheryl Swoops grew up in Brownfield, Texas, a small town less than an hour from the New Mexico border. She led Texas Tech to a national championship in 1993. After graduation, she signed her first endorsement contract with Nike.
For me, it was an honor to be in Portland, Oregon, on the Nike campus, having a conversation about women's basketball and then women's basketball shoes.
Nike was planning to produce the first ever signature women's basketball shoe.
You know, the question was, what do you look for in a shoe? What's important to you?
If you're a basketball fan or a sneakerhead, you already know that the first women's basketball shoe would be named after Cheryl Swoops. But Cheryl didn't know that, at least not at first.
It still did not hit me what that meant until they said the Air Swoops, the Nike Air Swoops. I was speechless. And they said, like, hello, are you okay? How does that sound? And I just needed to hear it again to make sure I heard what I thought I heard. Like, I can't even say it's something that you dream of as a kid, because it wasn't something I dreamed of as a kid.
Months later, while training with the U.S. women's basketball team, Cheryl received a shipment from Nike.
But Nike was always sending boxes. You know, it was like every day we go to practice and come back, and there are all these boxes everywhere. So everybody was like, woohoo! Like, we got a shipment of something.
This shipment was special. It contained the new Nike Air Swoops.
Like, I took all of the shoes out of the box. They're the same shoe. And, you know, I just remember holding them up, looking at the shoe, but then seeing my name on this shoe. It was like this is really happening. And so I remember putting it on, wearing it to practice. And, you know, and even my teammates were like, this is cool. Like, yeah, it's your shoe, but this is for us, right? This is for all the women out there who have fought, have struggled, have been told no, have had to battle. And this isn't even just about sports, right? Like, it was a huge statement for women, period, all over the world.
It's been more than 25 years, but Cheryl still gets emotional when she talks about her shoe.
Things like that aren't supposed to happen to, one, someone coming from a small town like me, two, to a woman, three, to a Black woman.
The world was changing. In the run-up to Atlanta, 1996 had been declared the Olympics for women. Advertisers, the media, and fans were eager to hop on board. But two teams, basketball and soccer, would face unique challenges in the lead-up to the games. And the women would have to lean on their teammates if they were to make it to the opening ceremonies. From Dear Media and Together, I'm Michelle Kwan. This is Summer of Gold. This is episode 3, A Tale of Two Training Camps. You're probably familiar with the U.S. women's soccer team's fight for equality.
Now to the story everyone's talking about today, equal pay for equal play. That's the message echoing across the country tonight as the U.S. women's soccer team making public appearances after their World Cup win.
But you might not know how long this fight has been going on. In 1985, Michelle Akers was invited to play for the national team. It was not a glamorous assignment.
It was like playing for the second soccer team I played for when I was like 9 or 10, the Thunderbirds in Seattle. The Thunderbirds had better uniforms than that first national team.
The women wore hand-me-downs from the men's team.
We got paid $10 a day. We had to buy our own cleats. People were poor. They were almost moving in with their parents just to be able to play for the national team.
In 1991, the U.S. captured the inaugural Women's World Cup. But when the event was next held 4 years later, the U.S. lost in the semifinal to Norway.
We realized that we needed more resources, more support to compete. Like, we had basically funded ourselves to be available to play for this team, and that wasn't going to work.
We'd now been on the team for about 7-8 years, many of us.
That's Julie Foudy.
We started to realize that a lot of what we called character building moments of crappy hotels, crappy transportation, sitting in the smoking section, they had that back then. We're like, we can't live like this. And then you start hearing stories about how the men's team's living. And you're like, wait, what? That doesn't seem fair.
It was almost hurtful because it's like, we're on the same team, aren't we?
That's goalkeeper Briana Scurry. She joined the team in 1994.
Like, am I speaking a different language that you don't understand when I say that if the men get 2 massage therapists, the women should get 2 massage therapists? We weren't demanding astronomical things. We were looking for stuff that made sense.
And it wasn't as if the men were getting better support because they were bringing in more sponsorships.
The Nikes and the Snickers of the world are coming because they want to attach themselves to a winner. And no offense, but the winner is the women's team. And so when they would say, well, we're doing more for you than any other governing body, we'd say, well, we're doing actually more for you.
The team was doing everything they could to promote women's soccer, but they knew their best opportunity was yet to come.
We felt like, oh, this is a window that we can capitalize on because it's the Olympics and Americans care deeply about the Olympics, and we got that.
That's Julie Foudy again.
In years past, when people would see us, kind of dressed up in our garb and getting on a plane, they'd say, oh, who are you guys? And we would say, oh, we're the U.S. soccer team. They'd be like, oh, that's awesome. Cool. Are you co-ed? What is it? They knew nothing about it.
But as soon as they could say we're the U.S. women's Olympic soccer team, things changed.
People would stop and put their hand over their heart or salute you. In fact, one plane, when the pilot told the plane, hey, we've got the U.S. Olympic soccer team on our flight today, the whole plane started singing the national anthem to us. So we realized quickly, wow, such a visceral reaction.
With the 96 Olympics on the horizon, the women knew it was time to fight.
Look, we've done enough character building. We've got character flowing out of our ears and our eyeballs. And eventually you get to a point where you're like, no, enough. And then you decide, okay, I can either just stay angry or I can do something about this.
The lead up to the Atlanta Games presented a different set of challenges for the women's basketball team. In the entire history of Olympic basketball, the U.S. women have only lost 3 games. 2 of those losses came in 1992 when the U.S. had to settle for bronze. With the 1996 Olympic Games being held in Atlanta, the team was determined not to lose again.
We have to be the best team in the world. We can't be second or third place in our own tournament on our home turf.
That's Michelle Smith McDonald. She's been covering women's basketball since the 90s. At the time, the best players could make up to $200,000 a year playing overseas. Instead, the women were being asked to spend 9 months preparing for the games. They'd travel 100,000 miles and play 52 games in 5 countries, all for a salary of just $50,000. Cheryl Swoop says the players didn't hesitate.
I think we all at that time were like, let's go. Right? Let's do it, whatever that means. And some of us were either married or in serious relationships, but none of that mattered.
In the lead up to the 96 Olympics, women's basketball looked very different than it does today.
You were very much still in a place where players were going overseas to play, and they were much more limited in their contact with home, with things that were familiar to them. It wasn't a terribly pleasant experience. They were in a foreign country. There was no Netflix where you can watch your American TV programs and keep yourself busy. There wasn't an easy way to contact family and friends. There was a lot of isolation and a lot of people wishing there was an opportunity to play at home because playing overseas, frankly, sucked.
Roughly 60% of WNBA players still go overseas in the winter. They return to the US to play in the summer. But in the early 90s, players didn't have that option, and that meant that fans at home never really got to see them at their peak.
If we only saw Michael Jordan play in college, if we only saw him play up until he was 21 years old, I mean, we would have missed out on greatness.
That's Dawn Staley again. In the months before the Atlanta Games, 2 rival professional women's basketball leagues announced their intentions to start play.
We found out about the ABL first, and then the WNBA was kind of shortly after that.
The ABL was the American Basketball League, an independent operation with some decent financial backing. The WNBA's prospects were even better with the juggernaut of the NBA behind it. Suddenly, there was more at stake at the Olympics than gold, silver, and bronze.
You know, it was added pressure for us to perform at a high level and to take America by storm and to make sure that they saw women play during the peaks of their careers. We often talked about it. The leagues are standing on the shoulders of our success.
The tour would take the players to China, Russia, and Australia to play against tough international competition, but they'd play more than half of their games in the U.S. The goal was to make them famous, here at home where no one had seen them play since college.
Every town they went to, it was kind of a barnstorm. They would go in, they would do press conferences, they were available to the local media. Everybody would write stories about the U.S. team coming into town.
The U.S. tour went through Storrs, Connecticut, Knoxville, Tennessee, Lubbock, Texas, and Stanford, California, places where fans knew about and appreciated women's college basketball. The team beat every opponent they faced, but Cheryl Swoop says winning wasn't enough.
We wanted to destroy them. Like, we didn't even want it to be close. Like, we're not even going to give you hope that you think you can beat us.
U.S. basketball fans had never seen a group of women with this much skill and athleticism.
We always felt like there's somebody in this gym tonight that's never watched a women's basketball game before. And this is our opportunity to show them what they've been missing out on. And so hopefully this may be your first time, but it won't be your last.
While the basketball players were focused on their 52-game barnstorming tour, Julie Foudy was trying to figure out how to get the U.S. Soccer Federation to take her team's concerns seriously. With the Olympics fast approaching, Julie was invited to meet with a group of women sports pioneers.
There were only about 10 of us sitting around the table, and Billie Jean is telling this small group about her breaking away from the Tennis Association.
Billie Jean is Billie Jean King, tennis visionary, gender equality activist, and Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. Back in the 1970s, Billie Jean was unhappy with the prize money offered to women in professional tennis. So she did something about it. She broke away from the established league and founded her own.
She's telling this story, and I am hearing this, first in the flesh from Billie Jean, in person for the first time. And it's essentially what we had been living through for the last 5 years of frustration. And finally, at the end, when she's done, I say to her, "Oh my God, this is everything we're fighting for."
Julie started telling Billie Jean about the crappy hotels and $10 per diems.
All of a sudden, she's like, "Foudy, what are you doing about it? You, the players. You need to get the players together. You have the power. Coincidentally, I happened to be flying from that meeting to go join the national team and sign yet another $10 a day per diem contract.
While she was on the plane, Julie had what she calls an epiphany.
I said to the players, we are not signing this effing contract. They can F off. And here's what Billie Jean King said.
The women didn't sign their contracts that day.
We got a lawyer, we got help, and that was the start of our fight.
We made sure that we understood the risks.
That's goalkeeper Briana Scurry again.
But we knew that we were on the right side of it. We knew we weren't just fighting for ourselves. We were fighting for all the young girls that are watching us and want to be like us, and fighting and showing them that they have to stand up for themselves and what's right.
In December of 1995, Julie Foudy, Michelle Akers, Briana Scurry, and 6 other starters were given new contracts to sign. Instead, they took matters into their own hands. They crossed out lines, wrote in changes, and faxed their versions back to the Federation.
It was monumental. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing, if what you're doing is going to be something that reverberates in history. But I felt at the time, and I think we all felt, that this was going to be something like that.
For refusing to sign the contracts the Federation had offered, the starters were immediately locked out of training camp. Preparations for the 1996 Olympics would begin without the 9 best players on the team. But not everyone stayed home.
There was a group of players like Shannon McMillan. Brandy Chastain had been cut from the team and was trying to make her way back in. And so those players were invited in. And they asked, can we go in? We didn't want to stand in the way of allowing them the opportunity to be seen, right? So I said, yeah, absolutely go in, crush it. And then when we need you, just make sure you're with us.
While Julie Foudy fielded phone calls from players who were invited to camp, Briana Scurry was coming to terms with staying at home.
I remember it felt a little bit weird, but I was proud of it. You know, I mean, sometimes you got to take a risk to do something that's bigger and greater than yourself. I knew that, you know, eventually I may not be asked to come back again, but I had waited and it was worth it.
Even the team's most veteran player, Michelle Akers, was concerned.
Absolutely worried. Yeah, absolutely. When you said yes, you had to know that we could miss the Olympics. And so it became more important to demand dignity and respect than playing in the Olympics.
Many of these women had long dreamed of playing for an Olympic gold medal. They had trained and sacrificed for the chance to introduce their sport to the world. Now, with the Olympics coming up in 6 months, the team's 9 best players were facing the possibility of watching the games on TV. But Julie Foudy says no one ever wavered.
We are so unified. That was the gift of what we had. We'd all lived it. We'd, started playing as 15, 16-year-olds on the national team. And now we're in our 20s and we're like, this is going to change. And we're going to change it because we're going to stick together. If we break apart, then we will falter. But if we stay together, it's, they can't not bring an entire team. What are they going to do?
But the Federation didn't give in right away.
When you put something like that out there, they want to call your bluff. So sometimes getting your bluff called takes a minute. The days and the weeks drew out afterwards, but that was to be expected. Time does end up being on your side if you can be patient and not blink first.
The main sticking point was Olympic bonuses. The men would be paid bonuses for a gold, silver, or bronze medal, but the women would only get paid for winning gold. The dispute played out in the media.
They called us greedy, and we don't reward mediocrity, meaning a silver and a bronze was mediocre. And that didn't play well, of course, publicly, because you had a lot of silver and bronze medalists who were speaking up for us saying, wait, are you telling me my bronze medal is mediocre?
Sometime in early 1996, nobody really quite remembers, the 9 starters got the news that they'd be welcomed back to camp. The women would earn bonuses for gold, silver, or bronze, and they'd also receive paid maternity leave and paid nannies for players with young children. Briana still remembers what she felt when the new contracts were signed.
That's it. Relief that we got the answer we wanted and needed and felt was right. With sports and with life, often the most memorable emotion you feel is relief.
When training camp started up again, Briana didn't feel like she had fallen behind.
It was almost like it was easier because that elephant was over there now. At least there was only one elephant in the room to win the whole thing as opposed to 2 elephants. The space almost got cleared up, you know what I'm saying? And so the sailing was no longer as rough and rocky. You know, the sailing weather was more calm.
The soccer team was back in training camp and the forecast was clear. But the basketball team still had a long way to go on their 100,000-mile journey. Cheryl Swoops doesn't sugarcoat what her team went through to get ready for the '96 Olympics.
That year was not an easy year.
Before they set out to play 52 games in 5 countries, the team spent 3 weeks at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs.
Where the altitude about killed us half the time. And, you know, we're up early in the morning, going to the track, we're running in the snow. Like, it was tough.
Once the tour actually began, Dawn Staley says it wasn't the back-to-back games that were the problem.
The schedule, wasn't brutal. What was brutal were the practices. I mean, Tara made it really hard.
Tara is Tara Vanderveer, the legendary women's coach at Stanford. She left her college job to make sure that the U.S. women won gold at the '96 Olympics. And she took her job very seriously.
And you have to understand, like, Tara's day offs weren't like your normal day off. Like, if we practice today from 10 to 1, and you expect the day off, meaning you got tomorrow off, like all of tomorrow off. Nah, not with Tara. Tara, if practice ended at 1, she thought that starting practice the following day at 3, where there were more than 24 hours in between, was a day off.
Tara says that's not exactly true.
She's exaggerating, yeah.
But Tara admits she didn't take it easy on our players.
Winning a gold medal is not an easy thing to do, and it's kind of how players are, They will complain about how hard they have had to work, but in a good way. They're proud of it.
The team sometimes needed a little extra inspiration.
One of our teammates, Ruthie Bolton, I think she was in ROTC.
Ruthie Bolton joined the Army ROTC while playing basketball at Auburn. She liked the challenge and beating the guys on the obstacle course.
We would have to run around the court as part of our warm-up. And we would follow her lead in her Army chants.
It was a call and response. Ruthie would call out a line, and the rest of the team would repeat it.
Up in the morning before.
It's been 25 years, so Dawn doesn't remember all the words.
Eat my breakfast much too soon. Eat my breakfast much too soon. Hungry as a bull before noon. I mean, it was those type of chants that got us going, and we would laugh about it.
And what little time the women had off, they spent together. They became close, like sisters, which was good because they soon learned that they need to lean on each other during practice.
There were times when we were training, I was like, oh no. Like, seriously, about Tara, I was like, this woman has lost her mind. There were several of us at times that were like, nah. But we, as teammates, having each other's backs, were like, oh no, you're not quitting. You're not leaving. You got this.
Tara was known for being intense, and she didn't go easy on anyone.
Everybody had their day. Like, Tara picked on And I think it was strategic. I thought she picked on every single person to put them in that position of wanting to give up, yet wanting to stay in it because we built such a strong sisterhood with each other. And I thought she built a wedge between us and her to create that.
Tara knew that being tough on her players would bring them closer together.
That was part of it. They could commiserate together a little bit. They were like, wow, we're working so hard. You know, Tara, she's crazy. They had each other, and they were the only people that could understand how hard they were working.
Sometimes the players would be on the bus, traveling to the next city, when they'd learn that instead of getting a break, they were expected to get off the bus and immediately dress for practice.
So I do remember on the back of the bus, we would sing, Jesus will work it out. If you let him, Jesus will work it out. We were so tired, so we just kind of sang our way to keeping our spirits high and then giving us enough oomph to get over that hump of another tough practice.
All the team's hard work paid off. They won 52 games in a row.
That's kind of unheard of, right? Like that's almost impossible to do.
After traveling 100,000 miles and playing games in 5 countries, the players must have felt a sense of relief. But they still had 8 games to go before they could capture the gold.